world came together to support its heroic efforts. And President Zelensky's Ukraine is still fighting. Russia has more than 1 million dead and wounded young men. 1 million in 3 years of fighting. To put that into some perspective, Russia had just 50,000 casualties after 10 years of fighting in Afghanistan. And then Russia withdrew completely. So let's make no mistake. Despite tiny advances in the East over the past few months, Russia is spent, exhausted. Russia won't recover from the human cost of this war for at least a generation. And Russia did not achieve its military objectives, namely to capture Ukraine's capital city, murder President Zelensky, and install a pro-Kremlin leader. Russia began the war in Ukraine, and Russia lost the war in Ukraine. I know it, you know it, the whole world knows it. And now we meet at HFX Taipei to explore Taiwan's security. At question is whether we live in a world where large countries can freely intimidate and ultimately invade their smaller neighbors. Over the next 2 days, we will hear words like gray zone, lawfare, porcupine. We will explore what China might do, what the United States should do, and what the international community could do. But the key question, of course, is what is Taiwan going to do? Halifax, Iwo Jima, Kiev, Taipei. They are all connected in our shared fight for freedom and democracy, because it is democracy, and only democracy, that leads to opportunity, lasting peace, and security. It is an honor to be here in Taiwan, this vibrant democracy. And more than that, it is an honor, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce President Lai. A former doctor by training, President Lai is no stranger to making tough decisions. Having served as legislator, mayor, premier, vice president, and now president, he knows politics pretty well. Taken together, President Lai has been a steady pair of hands navigating Taiwan through unprecedented challenge. And so far, he is succeeding. His polls have steadily risen since inauguration. The economy is poised to take off. And last week, he announced major defense reforms that will bring Taiwan closer to the US and other democracies. All of this will make Taiwan safer and more prosperous. It brings me great pleasure to welcome President Lai to HFX Taipei. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Halifax International Security Forum, President Peter Van Praag, Madam Abe Ake, Mr. Robert Tsao, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. To begin, I want to give a warm welcome to all the distinguished guests here at the very first Halifax Taipei Forum. The Halifax International Security Forum, held every year in Canada, has been an important gathering for freedom-loving nations worldwide. I would like to thank Halifax and President Van Praag for their strong support for Taiwan. Every year since 2018, Taiwan has been invited to participate in the forum. Last year, former President Tsai Ing-wen was invited to speak. And this year, Halifax has chosen Taiwan as the first location outside North America to host a forum. As President Van Praag has said, while the security challenges ahead are too big for any single country to solve alone, there is no change that can't be met when the world's democracies work together. Today, we have world leaders and experts who traveled from afar to be here, showing that they value and support Taiwan. It demonstrates solidarity among democracies and the determination to take on challenges as one. I would like to express my gratitude and admiration to all of you for serving as defenders of freedom. At this very moment, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is still ongoing. Authoritarian regimes including China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran continue to consolidate. China is hurting economies around the world through its dumping practices. We face grave challenges to global economic order, democracy, freedom, peace, and stability. Taiwan holds a key position on the first island chain, directly facing an authoritarian threat. But we will not be intimidated. We will stand firm and safeguard our national sovereignty, maintain our free and democratic way of life, and uphold peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan cherishes peace, but we also have no delusions about peace. We will uphold the spirit of peace through strength, using concrete actions to build a stronger Taiwan and bolster the free and democratic community. I sincerely thank the international community for continuing to attach importance to the situation in the Taiwan Strait. Recently, U.S. President Donald Trump and Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide issued a joint leader statement expressing their firm support for peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and for Taiwan's participation in international affairs. As we face a complex global landscape, I call on the international community to take the following actions. First, as authoritarianism consolidates, democratic nations must also come closer in solidarity. Just a few days ago, the top diplomats of the U.S., Japan, and South Korea held talks underlining the importance of maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. They also conveyed their stance against any effort to destabilize democratic institutions, economic independence, and global security. On these issues, Taiwan will also continue to contribute its utmost. I recently announced that we will prioritize special budget allocations to ensure that our defense budget exceeds 3% of GDP. Soon after I assumed office last year, I formed the Whole of Society Defense Resilience Committee at the Presidential Office. This committee aims to combine the strengths of government and civil society to enhance our resilience in national defense, economic livelihoods, disaster prevention, and democracy. We will also deepen our strategic partnerships in the democratic community to mutually increase defense resilience, demonstrate deterrence, and achieve our goal of peace throughout the world. Second, let's create long-range global supply chains for the democratic community to deter the expansion of authoritarianism. It must have strong technological capabilities. This can serve as the backbone of national defense, promote industrial development, and enhance economic resilience. So, in addressing China's race supply chain and the impact of its dumping, Taiwan is willing and able to work with global democracies to maintain the technological strength among our partners and build resilient long-range supply chains. As a major semiconductor manufacturing nation, Taiwan will introduce an initiative on semiconductor supply chain partnerships for global democracies. We will collaborate with our democratic partners to form a global alliance for the AI chip industry and establish democratic supply chains for industries connected to high-end chips. The achievements of today's semiconductor industry in Taiwan can be attributed to our collective efforts. Government, industry, academia, and research institutions have to overcome various challenges over the last 50 years for us to secure its position. We hope Taiwan can serve as a base for linking the capabilities of our democratic partners so that each can play a suitable role in the semiconductor industry chain and develop its own strength, deepening our mutually beneficial cooperation in technology. This benefits all of us. Moreover, it allows us to further enhance deterrence and maintain global security. Third, let's unite to usher in peace. China has not stopped intimidating Taiwan politically and militarily. Last year, China launched several large-scale military exercises in the Taiwan Strait. This escalation of violence to the peace and stability of the Pacific region. As a responsible member of the international community,
We're going to keep going. I would like to introduce Mr. Robert Tsao. This event would not be possible if not for Mr. Robert Tsao. His generous support brought HFX Taipei to life. Some of Taiwan's important friends are here in Taipei today because of him. We started having this discussion in the summer last year. Through HFX Taipei, I wanted to bring democracies together to see and understand why Taiwan deserves the international community's friendship and support. Robert, I think, wanted something a little bit different. He wanted the people of Taiwan to see that Taiwan was not alone and that it was part of a community of democratic partners willing to contribute to Taiwan's security. A wonderful match was born. We should be very proud of what we've accomplished here together. HFX Taipei brings our mission here. Building strategic cooperation among the democracies is what we do. And today, thanks to you, Robert, Taiwan is at the center of it. So let me give the floor to Robert Tsao so that he can share with us what we hope to accomplish over the next couple of days. Robert.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Halifax, for being here in Taipei. For the past 60 years, Halifax has been a powerful force bringing democracy together. It has consistently stood for freedom, justice, and opportunity, including in 2019, when it honored citizen protesters in Hong Kong, and in 2020, when it awarded former President Tsai Ing-wen for standing strong against Chinese pressure. Last year, when we first began discussions about holding Halifax's first ever overseas event in Taiwan, we had one common objective: to use the power of democracy to strengthen Taiwan's security. We wanted the world to see Taiwan for what it is, a vibrant democracy deserving of international support. We also wanted to show the people of Taiwan that we do not stand alone. Today, this mission is more important than ever. As the international community is aware, the Chinese Communist Party is intent on the annexation of Taiwan by any means necessary. Through disinformation, economic coercion, military threats, and political disunion, they seek to divide our society, degrade our institutions, and destroy our democracy. They must not be allowed to succeed. This gathering brings together people from around the world to rally around the cause of democracy and the importance of Taiwan. From the US, Japan, Europe, and all corners of the world, we show that we are strong, united. I'm particularly grateful to Mrs. Akiabe, who, together with her late husband, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, championed the cause of Taiwan and the friendship between Taiwan and Japan. And just as importantly, to the people of Taiwan, this event shows that Taiwan has a chorus of friends around the world. Despite our political differences here, we must come together for a greater good, the protection of our democracy and the way of life. We must fight back against China's effort to disenfranchise the people of Taiwan. And under President Lai's leadership, I'm confident we can succeed. I'm honored to be part of Halifax and proud to accept Peter's invitation to support this meaningful endeavor. I wish this event every success in the 2 days ahead. Thank you.
Okay, now please stay in your seats. We have a set change. It's not often or always that we have teleprompters, but that's what these are, and they're going to be removed. I'm going to introduce you to Nick Schifrin, who is going to moderate the next panel, and please stay in your seats and come and take this away.
In 40 years' time, do you think China will look more like Britain? Do you think, for example, there may be a democratically elected president?
So that's we come to the basic difference here. You believe yours is democracy, and we believe our system is democracy. We call it democracy of Chinese character.
We are here, it is my mic, amongst friends. As Peter says, this forum is for friends. Let's see if the mic is out, but we are here amongst friends in this room as well. So many names and faces that we have gotten used to celebrating every November in Halifax. We are here to mark Taiwan, Taipei, a vibrant, vital city, and a territory that we have all come to know so well, and one that plays an outsized role on the world stage. But we are also here to talk about Ukraine. We are here to talk about democracy in Ukraine. We are here to talk about the fight between democracies and autocracies. And so while we are here in Taipei, we must remember what they are doing on the front lines as well. My name is Nick Schifrin. I'm the Foreign Affairs and Defense Correspondent for PBS NewsHour. Over the next hour and a half or so, we will have two fantastic discussions. One, the one that will start now, is democracy equals resilience. We will talk about Ukraine to begin with. We will talk about NATO and the West and where it goes from here. And then we'll welcome Joseph Wu to the stage, who will come back, I'm sure, before our panel starts. There's an old saying at PBS NewsHour, we don't throw curveballs, but we throw fastballs. And as you all know, Joseph is very good to mix metaphors at hitting fastballs, and we'll see how he does with many questions, both about the strategic environment that Taiwan faces in the region, but dare I say also the strategic environment that Taiwan faces with Washington. So we'll get to that in a minute, but first I want to start by introducing this fantastic panel. Let me first start with Olena. Olena Tregub is the Secretary General of the Independent Anti-Corruption Commission in Ukraine and the former Director for International Assistance Coordination at Ukraine's Ministry of Economic Development and Trade. Thank you very much. Welcome. Liam Maxwell, at the end there, is the Director of Government Transformation for Amazon Web Services and is the former Chief Technology Officer and National Technology Advisor for the British government. Liam, welcome. Thanks very much for being here. And the person who needs no introduction to Halifax, but I'll introduce you anyway, Peter. Peter MacKay, former Canadian Minister of Justice and Attorney General, former Canadian Minister of National Defense, and former Minister of Foreign Affairs. So, Peter, thank you very much. Olena, I think it is, most people in this room believe it's fitting that I start with you. And so I want to give you the chance to respond to something that everybody here who I've talked to and everybody in Munich, where I just was for the security conference, is talking about, and that is President Trump. Quote, "A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. Zelensky talked the United States into war. If the President of the United States does not support Kyiv, what is the impact on Ukraine and what is the impact on what Ukraine is fighting?"
First of all, thank you very much to Halifax Forum, to you, Peter, dear ladies, gentlemen, excellencies. I'm very honored to be here and speak about Ukraine. It's a very difficult day today after those words that you just quoted. But I'm happy that we are here among friends, among people who value freedom, because Ukrainians know that they want to live in a free country no matter what Donald Trump says. And Ukrainians know that Zelensky is not a dictator. Zelensky has the approval rating, their trust rating above 50%. And our journalists all over media now publish the different results of our polls even though these journalists are very critical of President Zelensky. But now some Ukrainians are saying if there is indeed election, even those who didn't vote for Zelensky will vote for him to show the Trump that he should not disrespect our legitimate, democratically elected leader. And during war, we remain democracy, we remain resilient. America is our main ally, and at the beginning of the invasion, 90% of our security assistance was coming from the United States. Right now, this percentage decreased. Right now, around 60% is from US and 40% from European allies. So for us, the question is, can Europe step in and replace American assistance? Because when it comes to Ukraine, there is no question. We will continue defending our country. It doesn't matter if our biggest allies support us or not. This is our country. Ukrainian society remains united. And what is interesting, those words that you quoted, they united our society even more. Because we feel that Donald Trump, unfortunately, is speaking the words of Russian disinformation. And it is such a shocking event for us to hear those words, that our even political parties and different investigative journalists, even anti-corruption organizations, they all come together to protect our democracy. So I think our resilience and our unity is the most important thing. And when I heard from your president here that you also in Taiwan have this concept of all society, defense, resilience, this is absolutely right approach. There is no other way for a smaller country to defend itself from a bigger country. If not for our society, we would not be able to withstand Russian aggression. Russia has 10 times bigger army at the beginning of this invasion than us. But because we all united and because we live in democracy, it helped us to repel Russian aggression, despite what at that time Biden administration expected, because even though they supported us, they didn't really expect that we will be able to put out such a fight. So I think the same will be now shown to Donald Trump, that we are a resilient democracy beyond his expectations.
Liam Maxwell, you and your team were vital for Ukraine in the early days. You helped Ukraine migrate critical digital infrastructure into the cloud, and you also helped Ukraine's largest bank do something similar. Why is saving Ukraine's democracy important?
Very great, Matt. Sorry, my hopefully check. That's on now.
Check.
Yep, check. Great, thanks. Yeah, we were very lucky to work with a brilliant team of Ukrainians right at the very beginning of the full-scale invasion to help migrate essentially the core registers and the core data of the state into the cloud. And that was primarily an exercise in trying to maintain continuity of government and continuity of the technology that runs government, so that a very strongly technical public service organization could continue to operate. And I think we've said many times that one of the great things about the lesson we learned with Ukraine was actually we learned this with lots of other countries as well. And shortly afterwards, we signed an agreement with Moldova. We've been working with other countries in the same region. We've done a similar thing with Armenia. You may notice a pattern. So we've been having a really interesting engagement with countries where they are looking for resilience. And I think this is the point that you were making as well, is that in the resilience and the continuity, That is one of the things which states need to have in order to continue to invest, to grow, to develop jobs, to develop skills, whether or not they're in a state of war or not. But it's one of the things we are now finding governments coming to us and saying, the lessons that you've learned from that actually apply to us now, not just to a country that's in a state of conflict. And that's really, really important because in states of natural disaster, in states of cyber attack, all of those same things, there are similar issues which happen. And that's one of the areas where we've really found a fundamental approach which we learned with the Ukrainians. And I think I need to put on the record here really quite early that one of the reasons why it worked, and this is one of the things which has a parallel with Taiwan, is that there's a tremendously capable, highly educated workforce, population in Ukraine, the same in Taiwan, which means that the ability to adapt and to become resilient is something they found easier than other governments may have done. And I think it's that investment in skills and investment in capability, which for years Ukraine did and pursued, is something which is, as we look as the long-term lessons from this, that's one of the things I would really point out.
Peter MacKay, you are a longtime supporter of Ukraine, you're a longtime supporter of Taiwan, and we'll let you get to Taiwan in a second, but I want to ask you about Ukraine first. What is the impact if President Trump fundamentally turns toward Moscow and away from Kyiv?
It's devastating were that to happen. In spite of the words that the President has spoken, I don't get the overwhelming feeling that that is the broad-held sentiment of people in the United States of America, North America, or among the Western allies. And we've heard other alarming statements that have been made in the past number of weeks, including directed towards Canada. And so one hopes that there is a prevailing belief that we have to continue to support Ukraine in meaningful ways, not just words, and that Putin cannot win. We simply cannot allow a bulwark of democracy in the region, as with Taiwan, to fall under the heavy boot of a larger, more militaristic, authoritarian country. And so the rallying around of allies and other democracies to provide reassurance, in addition to arms and other necessary defense systems, is key. And so, you know, I commend Peter and others and Evelyn for having these important conversations, which are sometimes necessary to unpack and interpret events that are happening in such an accelerated way. You just came from Munich, and I've been to Munich and other conferences, and Jack McCain is here, and I can think of no more ferocious defender of democracy than the late Senator John McCain. And we have other representatives of other countries here who stand up for democracies in ways that may not be truly appreciated in the moment. But in this moment, at this time, these discussions are absolutely essential to promote democratic values, freedom, justice, the rule of law. And the interpretation of what may be said on any given day or tweeted on any given hour in Washington is not the story. The full story, in the fullness of time, will see, in my opinion, victory in Ukraine, which is the return to their sovereignty, their self-determination, and the vibrancy that exists in the people, in the hearts and minds of Ukrainians.
History might bend toward justice, or the arc of history might bend toward justice, but the quote is that it might take a long time. I'm not sure the exact right words. But what if, as you're saying, the debates happen and yet they fall on deaf ears in the Trump?
Well, again, not to ever downplay or diminish the importance of the United States in the global preservation of democracy and the impact everywhere. We share the North American continent with America and Mexico, I'm quick to add. And so the essence of democracy is change. Governments, administrations come and go. So that arc of time is, as the Germans say, an Augenblick. It doesn't last. And so history is important and informative here. Canada was, in fact, accelerated towards democracy because of the threat of invasion from the United States after their Civil War. That seems like a very long time ago, but in European history, that was not that long ago. And so I think there are important lessons, not to repeat, but important lessons to sometimes lean upon, that democracies have to be defended. And in this moment in time, with uncertainty and great trepidation about what may come next, I still feel very confident that the United States will do the right thing, which is to strenuously defend the greatest democracy in the world, which they are, but the preservation of others in the furtherance of these great partnerships that we've established around the globe.
Elena Trego, I need to ask one more question about the Trump approach to Ukraine, and then we will expand out on this panel. But a leaked version of a U.S. proposal to Ukraine that covers the economic value of not only Ukraine's minerals, but its oil and gas resources and ports and undefined future infrastructure. That deal calls for the U.S. to take 50% of recurring revenues from extraction, 50% of any future licenses issued to third parties, and there would be a lien on those revenues for the U.S. Just a few hours ago, President Trump was speaking to the pool on Air Force One, and he said that Ukraine had, quote, agreed to that deal more or less, and that when Treasury Secretary Besson arrived in Kyiv, he was treated rather rudely, because essentially they told him no. What does the text of that agreement say about the U.S. approach to Ukraine going forward?
From what we can see, what is publicly available, the text of the agreement is definitely a non-starter, because any Ukrainian president who would sign something like that would not be even considered legitimate leader of Ukraine by the people, because the conditions are such that we basically give up all those resources and revenues from existing and the new resources that we still need to explore. And in exchange, basically, we don't get anything. We just, it's a retrospective payment for the previous security assistance, which Donald Trump in his statements exaggerates like 3 or 4 times. And this is not a fair deal. Ukraine actually wants to have agreement with the United States where we will have a mutually beneficial setup, where we would indeed provide licenses to explore our critical minerals, rare earth minerals, but we want to see it as a way of security guarantee for Ukraine, that US would invest in those developments. US would also invest in producing products on Ukrainian territory, so that we also have some value added. And US, of course, will also benefit from that. But it's absolutely not the deal that we were offered. This agreement and this deal was offered to President Trump by President Zelensky even before presidential election, when President Zelensky traveled to New York to meet Trump in Trump Tower, and he presented to him their 4-point peace plan. And one of the points was this, like our economic cooperation, because we understand the mentality of the new administration is very much based on economic interest, transactional relations, so we understand this too. However, it seems that Donald Trump misunderstood us, and we hope that this misunderstanding will be cleared and we will come to a good deal.
Liam Maxwell, I see you writing some notes before, so I will give you the opportunity if you wanted to jump in on Ukraine, but I also wanted to give you the opportunity to expand on what you began to talk about before, which is zoom out for us. Democracy equals resilience. You have been around the world seeing this. How does democracy equal resilience?
Many circumstances, and to give you an example, just within governments and public services, the ability to have transparent accountability for expenditure and transparent procurement within government is one of those components of the delivery of democratic accountability to citizens. Because citizens pay taxes and they want to get the services back from their taxes for which they paid, and they want those services to be as good as any other service that they can get from a bank, from a financial institution, from similar. And the resilience that they need in that place is they need to trust government. And that's one of the things that we learned when we were building the British system, but also Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all of those digital services, that if you don't trust the government, you're not going to take part in those services. It actually makes government very much more expensive to run. So that ability to know that money is being spent appropriately, that services are being delivered appropriately, is right at the heart of what a proper, effective government can deliver. And the ability to show that transparency is particularly important. Last year we commissioned a report from the Open Data Institute, which is the fundamental part of the transparency movement, to identify where those changes happened. And it's interesting because Elena won't know that this is the result from it, I would imagine. But it actually pulled out, one of the top countries for that was Ukraine. The ability for Ukraine to have effective, open, transparent government, the use of its Prozoro engagement, was a fundamental part of identifying how to do government better and how to do it effectively. And I go back to this idea about the fact, and I suppose coming back to the theme of the wider theme that we see around the world, is it's those governments that can take and leverage the asymmetry that technology can help you provide to deliver brilliant services and brilliant government is one of the areas where we see worldwide governments taking that, grasping that nettle and doing it. And Ukraine is one of those governments that we see. We also see changes like that in Brazil. We see changes like that across Europe at the moment as well, and places like Sweden really grasping that approach. So I think it's the thing that we see, and the thing that we see, where we see democracy and its accountability in the fact that governments are transparent and open, is one of those areas where we see fundamental growth and the change and economic growth within the government sector.
Peter McKay, as I said, you've been a long supporter of Ukraine and Taiwan, so let's switch to Taiwan. What is the impact of what we've been talking about in terms of President Trump's pressure on NATO, Europe, and Ukraine on Taiwan and how it should think about U.S. support in the future?
Before I come to that, I just want to quickly pick up on Liam's last point about how technology, which is so vibrant here, but also in Ukraine, and how that embrace of accountable government and the ability of the citizens to interact with their government, I believe is becoming more and more important to the preservation and the promotion of democracy, because it underscores people's belief in their government or not. And it's the or not that is important here, because democracy is the ability for the people to change their government without the sound of a gun. And it's fragile. And it's not certain always. And democracies are frail. And of course, as Churchill famously said, the worst except compared to all the others. But But democracy has to be fought for at times too. And here in Taiwan, I think we're seeing some of the similar anxieties, and we're living in this age of anxiety, but the anxiety over what may come as a result of changes happening far from their shores, but that assurance of protecting democracy seems to be receding. And yet, as in other countries, diversifying and strengthening and shoring up your connective tissues with other democracies, which is certainly what Halifax and other forums promote, is the buttress to anybody pulling back. Anyone, even the biggest and greatest, because the connective tissue that I speak of, I think, is still going to be the protective armor for democracies in times like this. I think that reassurance and confidence and sharing of experience can be reassuring against some of this incredible anxiety that people are feeling, citizens are feeling, governments are feeling. So, to your question, Taiwan needs to look to other countries as well, and needs to strengthen trade, exchange, military. I mean, I note that, again, a little self-promotion here for Canada, we have the HMCS Ottawa traversing the Taiwan Straits. That small but important symbol of protection of this democracy has to continue, but has to expand and has to become more obvious, more prevalent. And at the same time, I do strongly believe that the spontaneous utterances that we're hearing do not really denote the massive shift in policy that is going to undermine democracies around the world. I don't want to believe that. And I do believe that the institutions of both the United States and other countries will prevent the complete collapse or even massive erosion of democracy. Those institutions will hold strong.
But you're saying Taiwan needs to diversify because why? The U.S. is no longer, as Seth put it, the guarantor of security.
Not the guarantor, perhaps, that it was 2 weeks ago, but a guarantor nonetheless, because we're not into a shooting war, we're not into invasion. And look, just to put it in a recent perspective, when Russia first invaded Ukraine, it was 2014, it was Crimea, was the first, but it had been going on for years before that. In the same insidious way, I say in this forum, that we are seeing the type of cyber attacks that all countries are under, including our own. Foreign interference is a very real issue. So it isn't just the crossing of international borders, it's the use of technology, quite frankly, that is a very real threat to all democracies. Once again, on the positive side, the shared interaction, and with great minds like Liam and others who are able to use technology not to weaponize, but to defend and to push back in very meaningful ways. We have the most sophisticated, informed generation in world history, and they have the information in the palm of their hands. That is going to continue, and countries like Taiwan have harnessed this, in my estimation, like no other.
They also have TikTok in the palm of their hands, though, too. So.
They do, which is going to be limited, I suspect.
Elena Tregov, you started talking about this before, but lessons for Taiwan to take from Ukraine. You work on anti-corruption, you work in civil society. What civil society lessons does Taiwan need to take now to become more resilient whenever the crisis hits?
Yes, thank you for this question, because we believe in Ukraine that the reforms that Ukraine underwent after Revolution of Dignity after 2014, they actually helped us to withstand Russian aggression. What we did, we opened up, and this is the lesson I guess that we can share, that the state, even the government institutions that are working in a very sensitive sectors, such as defense and security, they should become more transparent and more open to include society. In 2019, with the help of my organization, we adopted the law on national security of Ukraine, where we stated that society is an integral part of defense for Ukraine. And it includes everything. It includes democratic civilian oversight over military, over defense spending. It includes participation in defense of the territorial forces which were created after the invasion, when civilians form the units to help the army in case of the beginning of the war. It includes also a participation of society in defense reform, participation of society in building up their defense industrial complex. In Ukraine, society really entered this sector and helped to protect our country, helped to fill the gaps that our government had. We are a young country, young democracy. Our state, even though it is functional and resilient, it still lacks a lot of capacity. It still is sometimes not very institutional when it comes to big security functions. And you know, we have huge funds in Ukraine who started collecting money from society to buy drones. Then we had think tanks who helped draft reforms to help us adjust our military to NATO standards more, so that we have more horizontal army, command-driven army, where people can take decisions in a more decentralized way. When they are facing dangerous situation, they don't wait to hear what the top official says. They are agile. And this is what really saved us. And I think this is what Taiwan should do. They should really try to build this cohesion. When I explain the way Ukraine works to our partners, even US are surprised when the inspector from Department of Defense, Mr. Storch, who is overseeing security assistance to Ukraine, when they come and when they learn how much society has oversight over defense spending. We created Anti-Corruption Council of the Ministry of Defense. We participate in this monitoring of Prozoro platform, which Julian mentioned. All non-lethal procurement goes through Prozoro. And we even created supervision over lethal spending. When they learn about it, this is unprecedented. Pentagon doesn't have it. European countries don't have it. So everybody is surprised how come the sector can be so open and transparent, but this is our survival mechanism, and I think it would work well for Taiwan as well.
But you're not suggesting that corruption in Ukraine is over, right?
Corruption in Ukraine is very much exaggerated, and it is used against us as a narrative by Russia. It's part of the strategic, disinformation, cognitive warfare against Ukraine. Of course, we have so many anti-corruption investigations because we have so many anti-corruption institutions. We have a system where all government officials declare their assets, where we monitor all procurement, and sometimes, very often, where we see inefficiencies, Ukrainians immediately say, oh, it's corruption. But in reality, the fact that we have so many of these cases and we deal with them, we should turn it into our achievement, actually.
Meaning there is corruption, but you're fighting it, and that is the proof that we
Absolutely.
are a resilient democracy. Peter, sorry.
Well, no, Western countries, I think, and Canada among them, were very involved pre-Russia's invasion to help Ukraine build that capacity of anti-corruption. It is the reason and the narrative at the Bucharest summit in 2008 that NATO did not grant Ukraine membership action. But what was just stated in terms of this incredible learning that Ukraine has been undergoing as a result of this invasion, it's exactly why NATO should be granting them membership. This is going to be the most instructive war that NATO has ever observed. And yet, there are still member countries who are dragging their heels. And I, was at that conference in 08.
I think it's more than dragging their heels at this point.
Yeah, they're
Erecting
open
barriers.
Correct, erecting barriers, which will ultimately be very much to their detriment, in my opinion.
Liam Maxwell, bring us back to Taiwan. You've worked in Taiwan, AWS works in Taiwan. What technological lessons should Taiwan take from Ukraine?
So I think one of the things that we found talking about the way that the resilience of Taiwan was, of Ukraine was so demonstrated to us was a point that Elena raised earlier, which is it's the whole of society resilience, which is really important, because in an era of hybrid warfare, you're not going to get just kinetic effects. There's a lot of attacks on Ukraine and Ukrainian society. And so that approach to, I mean, we've talked about it sometimes and say it's wealth and health. It's trying to make sure that the country is in a position to be as prosperous as possible and as resilient, and resilience helps that be a part. So technological resilience of the technology platforms that you use to ensure that your society operates and the continuity of that is fundamental to it. But could I just come to another point, which I think is one of the learnings from Ukraine, which we saw. It reflects something that we tried to do in Amazon. Amazon is very famous for its leadership principles, but also one of the key things and reasons why we as a company can go fast is because we deploy an idea around one-way and two-way doors in decisions, that you try to deploy as far to the edge in the entire organization, this idea that people can take decisions. And if they can take decisions, take them quickly. And if it's a two-way door decision, if you think you've got 70% of the way there, take that decision. It's really interesting that it's a very similar approach to what you've been doing within the military. Yes. And so as coming back to your question, what would I, if I was a country, an organization thinking about working in the most resilient way, I would start thinking about those one-way, two-way doors and devolve decision-making down as far as you can so that people can take decisions quickly, effectively. And a two-way door decision is a decision you can come back to. And that's one of the things that civil services, I know very well. I lived in the world of Yes Minister and Whitehall. It can sometimes
we come from the world of Veep, so.
It can be sometimes be very difficult to take those decisions because you don't get a grasp of the risks. Take two-way door decisions quickly, and that would be my one takeaway.
Do you know if Taiwan is doing that already?
I don't at this point. I don't. We're in our government business. We're quite new to Taiwan. We've been here since 2011. We've switched. We've launched and announced a major investment in Taiwan this year, which is a multi-year investment of infrastructure. So we are learning at this point.
Peter McKay, there's been a lot of discussion in Washington when it comes to Taiwan about Taiwan spending more money, taking more responsibility for its own defense, and prioritizing an asymmetric defense. Today, do you think Taiwan has done enough toward those goals?
Those are familiar demands to a Canadian. And so are they doing enough? I think they're doing all they can. Why wouldn't they? You know, democracy is resilient when there's opportunity. And I think, you know, again, looking past the negativity that we feel, there is opportunity here. opportunities, as I said, to reach out, to diversify, to cozy up to other democracies, but in terms of business opportunity as well, those partnerships, trade agreements. You know, we hear the downside of tariff, but there's an upside to trade, and renewed and restored, and in some cases pronounced trade agreements for Taiwan, I think, are actually becoming a better opportunity in Europe, throughout the Asia Pacific, and in parts of North America. So I know exactly what it feels to hear that your country is not doing enough. We live in sort of a splendid isolation, I think, in North America sometimes. But we have vulnerabilities in our country as well. North America in the Arctic region is now becoming a very real vulnerability. And for that reason, and again, we have aggressive neighbors who, if we're not in Ukraine, would very likely be just across the water in the Arctic, menacing Canada and North America. We also see China expressing a very real interest in calling themselves a near Arctic neighbor, wanting to traverse the Northwest Passage, part of which is internal Canadian water. And so are we doing enough? I would say, again, for emphasis, we're doing all that we can. We want to do more. Democracy is also predicated on a performing economy and your ability to generate wealth, to be competitive, to send products. In the case of Taiwan and Ukraine, it's very often technology. There's another parallel, because Ukraine was a very, very forward-leaning part of the world when it came to aerospace and defense. We used Ukrainian helicopters in Afghanistan. And Canada, on the other hand, has God-given wealth of resource, oil and gas in particular, but foodstuffs, grains, things that we can send into the world where they're needed most. And so that allows you to generate more, to put into your aspirational goal of 2 or 3 or 5% of your GDP spending on defense. And so I think you're going to see greater emphasis and recognition of the geopolitical shifting sands that will force countries to do more. But that also means more trade, more opportunity, and more wise investment for their own sovereignty protection and projection of sovereignty and democracy for other countries.
So is Taiwan doing enough?
Taiwan, I think, can and will do more, as will Canada.
So I have time for about one more round, and then I will open it up to the audience. So please get prepared with your questions. Elena Tregu, we've been talking about Taiwan. You described your lessons for Taiwan in terms of civil society. And I wonder also if there are other lessons that you believe Taiwan should take in terms of the sense of unity that Ukraine has felt. You know, I've been going to Ukraine for more than a decade, since the Maidan, since 2014. It's not a cliche to say that when I was in Kharkiv in 2014, there were mixed responses to the Russian invasion of Crimea and then annexation. Today, we have, there is no mixed response, I would argue, in Ukraine. And I wonder if there's a lesson for Taiwan in that, which, as we'll get to in our next session, does have political divisions today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking that, because that's the other important point I wanted to mention. In Ukraine, we did not fully understand how much information can be weaponized. And for many years in Ukraine, we allowed Russian narrative to dominate. We allowed Russian TV channels, media, pro-Russian politicians to broadcast their views. And our people, especially in the East, they were influenced very much by these fake narratives. And this is why the unity was not quite there. Once the missiles started hitting buildings and killing babies, then the unity emerged immediately. And we made a mistake that we did not prohibit all this malign Russian information influences after 2014. We should have done it earlier. Instead, we did it only in 2022, after, as I said, the missiles started coming. And the same thing about how Russian Orthodox Church was influencing people. Also, it's essentially the department of an FSB. They are weaponizing church, Russians weaponizing media, weaponizing church. They are exploiting our openness, our democracy, our pluralism in Ukraine, using it against us. And we did not expect that it will be weaponized to the extent that they will, you know, start the kinetic war, but it happened. So Taiwan should be very careful with this, because I am sure that China is spreading the same narrative about Taiwan as Russia spread about Ukraine, that it's a messy, corrupt democracy. But China is not corrupt, Russia is not corrupt, North Korea is not corrupt, Iran is not corrupt, right? Because these authoritarians, they say that these democracies, they are completely incapable, they are feckless, they are weak, they are corrupt, but we autocracies, we the ones who give you good life. And this is the narrative that Russia was spreading through those TV channels and influencing those people you talked to. Because they were saying, look, Ukraine, you changed so many MPs, many presidents, but what is your result? If you join Russia, your salary will grow, you will have order, you will have no corruption. Of course, this is fake. Putin is probably the richest man in the world. How did he become such a rich man without corruption? But nobody talks about it because people who talked about it are dead in Russia. And this is the lesson, I think, very important, that information matters. It's a cognitive warfare. And you should be preparing your society to resist this warfare.
Liam Maxwell, let me ask you a pointed question. From where you sit, what would be the impact if Beijing invades, blockades Taiwan?
I think the effect on supply chains would be extremely severe at that point. And it's something that we hope would very much not happen, I think. We all saw what happened, I mean, think about what happened during COVID, which interrupted supply chains a small amount. And then think about what happens if you actually start to interrupt the supply chain of things where only one, you know, only the components of some things are only made in Taiwan. So that is a major change. And that brings us back to that idea about societal resilience, nation-state resilience, not just in Taiwan, but also in countries around the world, is to sit and understand and game out what happens when you're faced with these questions. I work with governments around the world. I work with about 60 governments. And we have engagements with them where the questions that are coming back from those customers to us now are, help us understand what happens if something goes wrong. Help us game out what happens if there is an incident, if there is a natural disaster, if there is a cyber attack. Because going back to my previous point, the trust of the citizens in the society is that you're a government, that your systems work, that they'll be there. If I need to get my benefits paid, they will be paid on Friday. If I need to have a health appointment, it's going to be there. If you have those things in place, if you have the continuity of government that's possible, that means the heavy lifting of running a society has been resolved. And I think it is really incumbent on all governments to try and be in that position where they are resilient, able to have continuity of government. And I would say an example of that was the education system, the university application system in Ukraine, which my team put together, which meant that anybody, no matter where they were in the world, could take their Ukrainian university entry exams. And that was not a sign of defiance, it was a sign of strength to say, we're still here, we've still got a government, we're still working, and you can still, life carries on. And that's actually one of the most powerful things that we can help people provide.
Again, this is my final question, and then we'll turn to the audience. Peter MacKay, forgive me for bringing it back to Trump, but I think this will give you an opportunity to perhaps say in something a larger point. When the President of the United States argues it's okay to annex Greenland on the basis of national security, including using military force, when it's okay to use economic force to perhaps force Canada to become the 51st state, does that erode the moral ground, the moral high ground, to argue that Beijing should not invade Taiwan?
Well, look, firstly, Canada's never going to be the 51st state of the United States. As much as we admire and partner with and work with on so many levels, it's just not in the cards. I think the point was made in a very articulate way that authoritarian, totalitarian countries like to poke holes in democratic countries and say, you see, one that comes to mind when there's a big protest in a democratic country. You see how out of control these democracies are. Imagine letting your people go out into the streets and protest. Well, what happens in totalitarian countries like Iran, like Russia, like China, is that they crush the people. They arrest them. They eliminate them. They disappear. And this is what is the real narrative. And the people in those countries that crave democracy, that civil societies that promote it, the use of communication that tells those in non-democratic countries what's really happening in the rest of the world. It's why the media are so important. And I'm not blowing smoke, but it is so important to get those stories out. Does it justify or in some way mollify China invading Taiwan to say, look at what the President of the United States is saying about Greenland, Denmark, Canada, Panama? No, absolutely not. There is no moral equivalency. Number one, these are musings. These are mouthing words, not actually sending shock troops into the streets to crush democratic expression. The very essence, the very lifeblood of democracy is people's dissent and their willingness, ability to express that to the people who they've elected, who they can unelect. And that's, that is, as I said before, not only fragile, it can be fleeting. We saw one of the most tragic examples in my lifetime of what happened in Afghanistan. They had for a brief moment a taste of what it would be like to go and mark a ballot without a gun. And so I think the hard lessons of democracy are that indeed it is worth fighting for. It is worth also reaching out to other democratic countries, as flawed as they may be, and saying, help us. And the last thing I'll say is when your friends and partners pull back, and when they very deliberately say, we don't want to be your friend anymore, you have to find other friends. And you have to work hard sometimes to keep those friendships up so they don't pull away. But if that is the determination, then you simply have to wait for cooler heads to prevail and go out and fortify your other friendships, because they're there. There's a lot of countries who I know are very much interested in engaging in meaningful relationships. And that's what it comes down to. Relationships that are built on trust and the knowledge that they have your back when you need them most.
On that note, let's open it up to the audience. I'm just going to look around and just see where our hands are, make sure I don't miss anyone. All right, so we'll start on this side and then we'll come around.
I'm Lobsang Sengye, former Tibetan president. I went to Kyiv for 36 hours last October, and 3 Shahed drones hit And I didn't run to the bunker, I slept in my hotel room. So I went there to show solidarity. But my question is, with the President Trump and President Zelensky, what prompted the reaction from Trump was President Zelensky called impromptu press conference to his office, and things that he said led to this escalation of rhetoric. So my question is, will you advise Taiwan, each time President Trump says something about Taiwan, should President of Taiwan also call impromptu press conference to respond to President Trump or not?
Elena, you want to answer?
Oh, that's a very sensitive question. I think, in my opinion, I think the best now for the president in such situation to wait a bit and to let other partners speak for him. Like, for example, the former British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who has good relationship with Trump. He should stand up and defend Zelensky. Some other leaders who Trump respects should defend Zelensky. Ukrainian civil society, even critics of Zelensky, should defend Zelensky, because what President Trump said about Zelensky is not true and not fair. This is why there are many people who can defend him, and Zelensky, he tried to respond with facts, but I just think you can respond with facts, but the tone should be more, that you should start with some good things that Trump is saying, because Trump is constantly saying that he is very sorry that so many of our people died. And this is, if he is truly sorry for our children, for our soldiers, for our women who died, this is a good thing, because this is what we have in common. Ukrainians want peace, and Ukrainians want to stop this war more than anybody. But Ukrainians understand that the deal that Trump is considering signing and that pushing us to sign may lead to more bloodshed and may lead to more dead Ukrainians. So if Trump is sorry about dead Ukrainians, he should make sure that no more Ukrainians will die. And right now, his deal actually is the opposite of that. And so this is why we should try to find a common ground with him, even though these words that he's saying are painful and unfair.
All right, keeping moving across the room. There was a woman here, yeah, right next to the cameras here. And then I'll keep shifting and I'll come back.
Yeah, okay. So good afternoon. I have an hypothetical question.
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Alicia Garcia Herrero. I'm a Southern European based in Taipei at the moment. My question is the following. It's about friendship. And this is the hypothetical question. What if your friend isn't there? Can we find friendship without the United States of America or without his president? Can we do that? The rest of the world, to support Ukraine, to support Taiwan? Can we do it, or do we have to give up?
I'm not sure it's a hypothetical question. This is exactly what you were addressing at the end, so take that on, Peter.
I mean, you always want the United States to be your friend. And I think the vast, vast majority of Americans that I've encountered in my lifetime and through politics and otherwise have a real affinity for other Western countries, Canada included. And so you can, I think, you can simultaneously pursue those friendships and that attachment and partnership that we crave, but also perhaps at various moments in time, this being one of them, lean on others. And you can't respond, just to go back very briefly to the question, you can't respond to every sling and arrow that comes your way. You can't. You got to govern. You have to make important internal decisions and external decisions. And if you're just responding to one, albeit very loud voice, it's going to have, I think, a detrimental impact over time. There's an expression, roughly, you can't fight with a skunk, right? You'll get smelly and the skunk likes it. So there's no point, in some cases, responding each and every time there's a rhetorical thunderbolt that comes out. But I think there is enough resilience, to use that word again, amongst the Western allies to continue to strengthen the ties that bind.
There was a hand right on this side. Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Ming Chang. I'm actually a Taiwanese American. I have a question for Elena. Obviously, we all heard a very controversial remark from President Trump. And if you have a direct communication to the people in the United States and all members of the Congress, I'm sure many of the members in Congress will have different opinions with President Trump. What kind of message would you like to relate to them?
Yeah, thank you for your question. First of all, Ukraine is very grateful to the people of the United States for supporting us. Without the assistance that we have received, it would have been very difficult to control majority of our territory, to live in a free capital, to even have control over part of Russian territory in Kursk. American assistance made us stronger. We're very grateful for that. And we also should remember that majority of American voters, including Trump voters, they do support Ukraine. They do. And now we saw in the Congress, even Republican Party, their members of his party spoke to support Ukraine and spoke to say that his words against Ukraine are not fair. And we need more people in America to speak up. That's what we would want to ask them to do, because we sometimes in Ukraine, we wonder, because we are such a vibrant democracy, and if our president does something we don't like, we immediately stand up and speak up and protest. And the same way Americans should understood that if Donald Trump has intention to betray Ukraine, it will be the biggest betrayal in history, which will also jeopardize their own national security, because it completely is against their own interest as a nation. And they should look at it and tell President that they are not happy with those decisions, and we hope they will.
Jane Harmon, former member of U.S. Congress, and very disappointed in the timidity of my former colleagues on this topic. I was in Ukraine in 2014 on an NDI delegation led by Madeleine Albright to observe the fair and free election in Ukraine of Poroshenko. And I remember Madeleine commenting that Russian penetration of Ukrainian TV was enormous. And in spite of that, it was a fair and free election. Now we have social media in massive amounts, and that wasn't mentioned here. And my question is there any way to prevent or at least reduce Russian disinformation on social media, and will it become even more potent than penetration of TV?
Ian, is that something that you want to engage on?
I think technically there is a way for that, and I would like to call out there are other technology companies that work very strongly to help with the stopping of disinformation into Ukraine at the beginning of the war, and so that is technically possible. But that again is an operational decision that people need to be able to take, and I'm really not the person to say whether or not that should be the thing, but that's very much your area.
I might just take a quick run at that, and Jane Harmon is a perfect example of a great American representative who has engaged all over the world in terms of promoting democracy, as did John McCain. I mean, it's a terrific question. Nick, you and I have young kids, and you mentioned TikTok, and there are others that are now this democratic platform for people to say anything. But this is an age-old debate that predates internet and technology about what you can actually say about a person. And it used to be the protection could be found in the courts. And you could sue somebody, you could push back through libel laws. That seems to have gone out with the tide. But the same debates are coming back now about what you can say about a person or a country or a policy and misrepresent and weaponize words, as was stated. And I think all countries are struggling with this. Totalitarian countries, ironically, don't, because they shut it down. They simply eliminate people's ability to communicate. We saw that in Iran when people were in the street and they were using social media to organize and to push back, the woman life freedom movement. And so there has to be, and this is my view, a clarion call for the big tech companies, many of whom are quite now very prominent in the new American administration, ironically, to take greater responsibility for the material that is being purveyed on those platforms, particularly when it is so pernicious and so misleading and undermining these principles of democracy, of what's fair, what's true, what's accurate, and what's dangerous, and remove some of that content. But any time that discussion gets to the point of, okay, that's your responsibility because you're making billions of dollars off this platform, but it's freedom of speech. Well, it's not freedom of speech if you're trying to stoke warfare, you're trying to discredit and eliminate your opponents. And I don't think we've advanced nearly far enough in that discussion in all our countries.
Intelligence officials on background criticized X for not having any filters for disinformation, but they did so before the election. I haven't heard that call from them
Can
since.
I add just briefly about X, because
just quickly, and then I want to get to one more question.
Just very quickly, what we've noticed, like in recent months, the Ukrainian voices on X and pro-Ukrainian voices, they went down and they became less visible. And we wonder, is it okay that the algorithms of X are not transparent? Elon Musk is not explaining us how X works. So is it some fair algorithms that brought Ukrainian voices down, or is it manipulated now by the Trump closest advisor? And this is, we're not even talking here about Russian social media like Telegram, which are like highly dangerous, but you see there are these issues even in the United States which you addressed, and they are not addressed in the US.
All right, I think we've got time for one more question. Nancy over here at the end. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anyone. Okay, let's do Nancy right here, and then I'll try and come back. Yeah.
Hi, Nancy O'Kale. I'm the president of the Center for International Policy, and thank you so much for this fascinating conversation and candid discussion. Elena, I mean, what you've mentioned about the unity in Ukraine in response to the threats or the comments from President Trump is really admirable, and the resilience, and even saying like even the critics are now united. And we've seen this around the world, like from other countries that, I mean, have like felt and sensed that kind of threat. However, at the same time, left for so long, that could be a recipe for repression and authoritarianism. I mean, it's like the saying of like, no voice should be louder than the sound of the battle. And how concerned are you that this could be a slippery slope towards, I mean, giving up freedoms and also, I mean, like a vibrant democracy. And this happens everywhere, like even in the United States after 9/11, it's like people were willingly giving up their own freedoms and allowing surveillance because there's the external threat. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for this question. No, I'm not worried about it. When I read some articles that are like expressing concern that Ukraine becoming authoritarian, or when Donald Trump calls Zelensky dictator, I just laugh because in Ukraine we have so many voices that are speaking against Zelensky, against the current Minister of Defense. We have so many investigative journalists, and nobody is disappearing like in Russia. Nothing happens. People can speak even during the war. I received phone calls from Ukrainian national radio, which is state-owned, and they asked me, do you think our Minister of Defense is bad? Is Zelensky a bad president? They ask me questions like that during war. I'm sometimes amazed myself, you know. At the same time, people think that we will become autocratic. No, what is our real danger is that we will have divisions in society and start fighting from within. This is a bigger threat that we have in Ukraine. And this is what should be avoided.
On that note, I think that's, unfortunately, we're about out of time. So on that note, I think that's a good note to end on. So Elena, Liam, and Peter, thank you very much, and thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Liam.
Saw you from the monitor.
Yes. Thank you.
While we let Joseph Wu come, those of you who attend Halifax every year know that I do this brief, and Joseph will now see this as he walks in. Good to see you. Thank you very much. I will just give a brief here. You can say just a brief opening here. That Taiwan faces 3 strategic environments, and Joseph, I'm giving away my first questions. The first, of course, is Beijing, and that almost goes without saying, but we need to talk about its coercion. The second, as we've been talking about, is President Trump, and Washington. We'll talk about that. And the third is domestic politics, and it does connect to President Trump and whether this government will be able to execute on the plans that it has. So with that introduction, Joseph Wu, thank you very much. Director General of the National Security Council, former foreign minister. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Wonderful to see you.
Let's start with those 3 aspects of the security environment. Can you give us a sense of how you feel about Beijing's coercion today, and also what timeline is Xi Jinping on?
There's several aspects I can comment on this. The pressure on Taiwan has been increasing, and the kind of pressure would include economic coercion, military coercion, hybrid warfare, gray zone activities, things like this. And they've been gearing up all these kinds of pressure against Taiwan. For instance, on the military pressure against Taiwan, there were several rounds of large-scale military exercises last year. Just give you 2 examples very quickly. In October, there was a Joint Sword 2024B exercise. Within 13 hours, they mobilized more than 130 sorties. It's a very serious threat against Taiwan. And in December last year, they did not announce it, but in our count, they assembled about 90 ships, close to 100 ships in the East China Sea, in the Taiwan Strait, in the West Pacific, and also in the South China Sea, as if they are going to launch a war against all these 3 countries on the first island chain. So the military threat against Taiwan is increasing, and it is something that we have to deal with. But other than that, there's also hybrid warfare. Right. You mentioned about disinformation, TikToks, things like that.
And Xi Jinping's timeline?
On this issue, I'm not Xi Jinping aware. I don't work in Zhongnanhai, so I cannot speak for him. But we understand that there's a lot of talk in China or in the international community that maybe there's a time, like 2027, the PLA is going to invade Taiwan.
Or Xi Jinping, I believe the U.S. intelligence assessment is that Xi Jinping has asked the PLA to be ready
exactly.
to invade.
That is more exact in the information. We saw that Xi Jinping has demanded that the PLA needs to get ready, but he did not mention about the get ready and then they will invade. But the most important thing for us is that, seeing the case in Ukraine, we know war is a disaster for everybody, especially if there's a war involving Taiwan and the semiconductor supply chain is disrupted, or the maritime transportation along the Taiwan Strait is disrupted. It would have a global impact. I know there's a study, very good study, shows that there will be about 10% GDP, global GDP affected. So under these kinds of circumstances, the primary objective of Taiwan government is to stop war from happening. We don't want that. I don't think international community needs that. And in order to stop that, we need to have deterrence. We need to strengthen our defense capabilities, and we need to have international friends. So for that, for Halifax to bring friends to Taiwan to show support is highly appreciated.
So let me ask about the second aspect of the strategic environment you face, and that is Taiwan's most important friend. President Trump has been publicly critical of Taiwan, repeatedly accusing Taiwan of, quote, taking all our chip business, threatening tariffs against Taiwan's leading semiconductor companies. And he said versions of Taiwan's very far from us, it's very close to China. And privately, he's been even more dismissive. Trump just a few hours ago said, quote, it is possible to have a new trade deal with China. Are you worried that President Trump will not be as supportive of Taiwan as his predecessors?
Again, there are several aspects I can elaborate on this issue. For Taiwan's security, I think there's only one country that is responsible for Taiwan. That is Taiwan itself. And for that reason, we want to make more investment in our security, and we want to be stronger. But in this process, I should say that the United States has been very helpful, providing us with defensive articles and help train our soldiers, and also try to bring us more to the international community. I would say in the last few years, our relationship with the like-minded partners have been increasing, and that is because of the U.S. government. And I see that trend remains. Our support in the Congress, our support from those people who might be, who were already nominated or who will be nominated and serve in the administration will still be there. So I think the Trump administration's support for Taiwan will remain very strong. But for the issue that you just mentioned, the economic relations between Taiwan and the United States, even though there was some mentioning that we stole American jobs and we stole American chip businesses, I need to stress that if you look at the TSMC, they started from scratch. There was some help from the international community, of course, but they continue to excel themselves. We did not steal anything from anybody. And Taiwan has been very honest in doing business with the international community. I know there's a guy who has been stealing stuff from us, from the United States, and from others. And that is that big fat bully from our neighborhood.
Third aspect of the environment that you face is domestic. The KMT, the TPP have a majority in Parliament. How will you prevent their blocking your efforts to increase defense spending and buying more for the United States?
It is not easy. Sometimes it is very easy for me to discuss security relations with our friends around the world, but it is always difficult for me to comment on domestic politics. Taiwan is a democracy, and natural things come in a democracy. There will be opposition. They will continue to speak about bad things happening in Taiwan. That's natural because they are in opposition. But it gives us terrible time when they are the majority. And we have experienced that, not just now. In between 2000 and 2008, the DPP was also a small minority in our parliament. And I still remember during those years, I was serving in the cabinet as a minister for Mainland Affairs, and the budget was cut, budget was frozen, and basically we weren't able to do anything. And then the opposition used that the government is not able to do anything to accuse the government for not achieving anything. So that is a difficult part of Taiwan's democracy. But I think we need to trust the people here in Taiwan. When they feel that the budget cut has already hurt the regular people, I think they will have their own judgment on which approach is better. And I think for the international community, they can also play a role, especially when the PRC is increasing its military pressure against Taiwan. The consensus is that Taiwan needs to shoulder more responsibilities, and that is what we, the government of Taiwan, trying to do. And if the budget is slashed, we want to use a special budget to jack up our defense budget. And we think that is our national defense, and that is our own responsibilities. And by that time, we will spend more time in trying to convince the opposition that if they continue to cut the budget, even the special budget, is not in our national interest. And I also believe that the international community, when they see that if the opposition continue to dig into that issue, trying to hinder Taiwan's national defense or build up of Taiwan's defense capabilities, I think the people around the world, especially good friends who care about Taiwan, they will speak up as well.
Okay, so that brings us to this special budget. Are you planning to buy $7 to $10 billion of American weapons?
We cannot put it that way, but thank you very much for raising this issue. Let me explain. We need to think about how to defend Taiwan, which are the best systems that we can acquire. And for that issue, we need to discuss with good friends in the Pentagon, in the National Security Council, for them to exchange with us on what kind of systems are the best for Taiwan to be able to defend itself. And since the Trump administration is so new, and most of those officials at the level that they engage with us on a daily basis are not there yet, but eventually we will get together and discuss on this issue. There may be expensive systems, there may be cheaper systems that are small, in large numbers, and also very effective, but we will discuss with them on those things that Taiwan will need to defend itself. But of course, we also have our own desires, especially in facing gray zone challenges by the PRC on a daily basis. Some of our systems are getting old, some are getting fatigued, and therefore we need to discuss with the United States on the possible systems to deal with the gray zone activities as well.
But with all due respect, the people who are in charge of the National Security Council are, frankly, your friends, people you've known for a while, as the head of the Secretary, the head of the State Department. So with all due respect, are you planning a big weapons purchase, given that you already know what those officials want you to buy?
We want to discuss in more detail before I can say anything about the kinds of systems we're going to buy. And you are exactly right. Some of those people who are in office already are very good friends of Taiwan, big supporters of Taiwan for their life. If you look at the National Security Council, beginning from the National Security Advisor, Deputy National Security Advisor, senior directors, not just singular, it's multiple, senior directors, they are all our good friends for a long, long time, and some are personal friends of myself and some of my colleagues over here. So with this very good lineup in the National Security Council, who work very closely with President Trump, and also in the State Department and the Defense Department, I think Taiwan is in good position.
Let me expand the question out, because President Lai on Friday promised to balance trade with the United States. Right now, you run a trade surplus of $73.9 billion. On top of whatever you decide on weapons, is there a basket of purchases that you can offer to President Trump? Farm products, LNG, et cetera, and how much?
Thank you very much. We don't have the detail yet, but we are working on this. Buying from the United States is not giving the United States. It's a fair trade. And if the United States has a very good product that Taiwan happens to need, and that will be the items that we will be thinking about. And right now, our cabinet has been discussing, not just among ourselves, but also with the industries here in Taiwan, what we would possibly need from the United States, that would also be in our interest. Sure. So in our calculation, we may buy more industrial products. For example, generators. The United States is probably one of the 2 or 3 countries that produce very effective, very good machines. And LNG, the U.S. LNG quality is very high, and now we are not buying more of U.S. LNG. It's because we're buying from Texas and Louisiana, and if the ships need to come to Taiwan, they need to go through they need to go through Panama Canal, and it takes a long time. And if Alaska starts producing LNG in big numbers, that will be a very good time for us to buy more, and we are in discussion with Alaska now.
The reason I ask is in part that as we watch the Trump administration's pressure on Europe to step up, Europeans are trying to spend more on defense, but European officials tell me they don't know exactly what to say or what to do to convince the Trump administration that they are reliable partners. Do you know what you have to do to convince the Trump administration you're a reliable partner?
If you look at the history of the relations between Taiwan and the United States, Taiwan has been a very loyal and very good, very reliable partner of the United States for a long time. And I still remember when President Trump was in office for the first time, Trump first, their standard way of describing Taiwan, and I still remember in my head so clearly, Taiwan is a democratic success story, a reliable partner, and a force for good in the world. And that was in the first Trump administration. And now comes the Trump second. I don't think that is going to go away. So Taiwan will continue to be reliable. And Taiwan will be a very reliable business partner as well. President Trump is talking about semiconductors, especially the most advanced. And we are discussing right now on how we can complement with each other. President Lai mentioned an initiative last Friday, and he also touched upon that a little bit earlier. We want to create a semiconductor supply chain partnership, and the United States would need advanced chips in order to facilitate the idea of AI center of the world. And Taiwan produces most of the most advanced chips, and Taiwan can support the United States. And other than that, Netherlands has very good machine tools. And Japan is also very good. And the United States is very good in IC design. And there are other countries like Lithuania. Their laser technology is very good in the semiconductor industry for the cutting of the wafer. So if we are able to bring all these countries together, I think we can form a non-red supply chain without China.
You're obviously hoping that all the steps you take, whatever steps you decide to take, will forestall the tariffs that President Trump is threatening for early April. That would be reciprocal tariffs on Taiwan, but also on the semiconductors that you just mentioned. But if you cannot forestall those tariffs, will Taiwan respond economically to U.S. tariffs?
We have been discussing among ourselves to see what kind of impact it would have on Taiwan. I mean the tariffs. But so far, we think that if it's level playing field, if everyone received the same thing, then the only cost that would come is the U.S. consumers. And I'm sure eventually the U.S. will reconsider its decision. But right now, we are still trying to get more information on what might be coming, and so that we can make adjustment in our economic structure. But I think the most important thing of all, if we think about the current world economic situation, the president's already touched upon that, is the heavy subsidy by the Chinese government in producing en masse on a lot of things that is causing the problem for the United States, for Taiwan, for Korea, for Japan. If you look at the automobile industry, Germany is in trouble. Japan is in trouble. Why is that? It's because of the dumping of the Chinese e-vehicles. And it comes from a heavy government subsidy. And if you look at shipbuilding, look at the ratio of American shipbuilding and the Chinese shipbuilding is 1 to 367, and that is because of the Chinese heavy subsidy. And it's taking a toll on our shipbuilding businesses as well. So if we understand where our problem is coming, then I think we should get together. The democracies around the world need to unite in dealing with this issue, and this is what's on our mind.
President Trump and his team are putting extraordinary pressure on Ukraine, pushing an economic deal that would have given away basically half of Ukraine's strategic investments, and now pushing Zelensky to hold an election. Does that give you pause on what the Trump administration will demand in order to continue supporting Taiwan?
We are watching the development in a very careful way, but if you look at the situation in Taiwan, I think we are a little bit different from what's going on in Eastern Europe. Some of the key Trump administration officials, they've been talking about pulling out of Europe for quite some time. And the objective of pulling out of Europe is to concentrate their resources in the Indo-Pacific to deal with one specific country, that is the PRC. So with that, I think Taiwan is not in a bad position. In fact, Taiwan might take advantage of it. But I think what's happening in Eastern Europe is something that we will continue to pay attention to. We know who initiated war. There's no doubt about it. And who is suffering, and we know it. And from Taiwan's perspective, we'll continue to provide humanitarian support. But at the same time, we also understand our own responsibilities. We'll continue to strengthen our defense capabilities. No one has any obligation to support Taiwan or defend Taiwan unless they find that Taiwan is in their interest. The most important is Taiwan itself.
You say the U.S. Taking its foot off the gas, I believe is how you put it, in Europe might allow them to finally pivot to Asia. But what would be the impact if the United States allows for a peace in Ukraine that Russia prefers and Ukraine doesn't want, or in fact cuts off support for Ukraine? What would be the impact on Taiwan, and what would Beijing's lesson be?
Well, I think that is an issue. When I saw the social media, a lot of people are talking about that, and I understand that fully. But serving in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for more than 6 years, I know there are things I can say and there are things I cannot say. And I'm sure you will have some sympathy for me. But from our perspective, the real thing is our own fate. And our own fate is controlled in our hands. And we should not budge. And we will not budge. And that is a word coming out of our former president and our current president, and it's our policy. For us, the most important thing is not to be a provocateur. We don't want to provoke a war. We don't want a situation that Taiwan is blamed by the international society while China attacks Taiwan. And of course, we need to strengthen our defense capabilities. At the same time, we want to make friends with fellow democracies. And right now, we see support for Taiwan from around the world has been increasing. Just look at the simple fact. When leaders of the world getting together, they started saying peace and stability over the Taiwan Strait is very important and indispensable to global security and prosperity, and they oppose unilateral change of the status quo by force or by coercion. And that makes people here in Taiwan feel so much more comfortable, knowing that we are not alone in dealing with the PRC.
I've got time for 2 more questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Part of what you have done, what the Lai administration especially has done, what you call resilience, what we would call the preparing of civil society, that includes getting ministries ready for a China contingency, as it's called, but it's also warning citizens, it's warning people that this could come. But do you have buy-in from the population? 16 cities are controlled by the KMT, only 5 by the DPP. Do Taiwanese understand the threat as you're trying to convey it to them? And do you have the buy-in of the people to actually push this resilience forward?
This is also very important for Taiwan. There's several purposes of it. One is that we don't want China to mistake that they can take Taiwan over very quickly, that the people here in Taiwan don't know how to save themselves. So this is the number 1 purpose. The number 2 purpose is that if there's going to be a crisis, the people here in Taiwan can sustain, and the government can also sustain. So this is the primary purpose. And we have launched this whole of society resilience project for about 2.5 years. It started by President Tsai, and President Lai thinks that it is very important, so he's trying to gear up this kinds of effort. We want to make sure that if crisis come, we have sufficient food supply, water supply, energy supply, and satellite communication, and all this. And this is a hard effort, and whole of the government has been working on this whole of society resilience project. And other than that, we will also work together with civil societies and also the local government. So there's a sequence of things that we want to do, and right now the central government is all mobilized.
Do you have buy-in from people, do you think?
I'm sorry?
Do you have the buy-in from the population?
We are trying to do that, and the president is doing a fantastic job by creating a committee, whole of society resilience committee, in the presidential office by representatives from local government, NGO, things like that, so that it can be seen by the general population that we need to be ready. The more we are ready, the less likely the war will happen. And we're trying to push it down to the local government. For your information, in a few weeks, we are going to do a small exercise in one of the local cities so that that city can be seen as a model for the rest of Taiwan, and there will be representatives from other counties or cities to come and observe. So this is our effort. And I'm sure when the local government, either controlled by the KMT or the DPP, they understand that this is very important.
And I started with Beijing and I'll end with Beijing. Do you believe today that it's more likely that Beijing will one day, if it decides to do this, would invade Taiwan or blockade Taiwan?
It is hard. Back to the first answer, I don't work in Beijing, and therefore it's hard for me to understand the thinking of the Beijing people. But this a school of thought on the PRC. They are followers of ancient military philosopher called Sun Tzu. And Sun Tzu's #1 principle is to crush the enemy without the actual use of force. And I think what Beijing is trying to do to Taiwan seems to be like that. They want to put so much pressure on Taiwan. They want to isolate Taiwan from the international community. They want the Taiwanese people to feel that it's hopeless for us. They want to go through the disinformation, cognitive warfare, things like that, so that we will give up our defense and cave in to the Chinese demand. So, that's the situation we see. But we don't know whether China is going to invade Taiwan. And the best way to prevent that from happening is to be prepared. I know there are American leaders, previous leaders, who have been saying that in a wonderful way.
And quite often for the years. So, all right, let's open it up. I'm going to start in the middle here, and I'm going to call on people, forgive me, who haven't asked a question already. So we'll start there, and then we'll go across the room. Do we have a microphone? Yeah, right here in the middle, and then we'll go to the right side. And please try and keep your questions brief and introduce yourself quickly, please.
I'm Admiral Retired Nirmal Verma from the Indian Navy. U.S. policy in respect of Taiwan is based on the principles of the Taiwan's Relations Act and the 6 assurances. And it seems to have stood the test of time. Yet we find analysts talking about the need for the policy of strategic ambiguity to change to strategic clarity. Is that the perception in Taiwan, and where are the gaps seen?
I know that's a U.S. Should I wait for more questions?
No, please. Yeah, I'm just directing.
I know that's a U.S. Political debate, domestic political debate, and the international community has also been debating about it. And in Taiwan, some people are also commenting on this issue. But for the government officials here, the real thing is how much we are able to work together with the United States in terms of Taiwan's security. And right now, if the U.S. can continue to provide Taiwan with ammunitions or defensive articles and help us train our soldiers and continue to discuss with us on the defense principles, things like that, I think it's very clear that the United States is supporting Taiwan. And with the U.S. support, I think we will be more confident in defending ourselves. So the debate on clarity or ambiguity, to us, it may not be that meaningful. The meaningful thing is real substance, and right now, the U.S. support for Taiwan is very real.
I see all the hands, but unfortunately I'm told that the Director General's time is short. So please thank Joseph Wu, Director General of the National Security Council, National Security Advisor to Taiwan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Good to see you in person.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And if you all could just stay tight for 1 second, we'll reset the stage and be right back with you.